Here we go. We are already at almost 40 countries. Welcome to First Laws International's second conference. This is the evening conference for those of you that are in Europe, and it's morning for those of you that are in the States or on the Western Hemisphere. We're very grateful to have so many of you, some of you for the second time. And of course, yesterday we hosted our members only, our partners only conference where we share some insights and highlights about the development of our technology and trends in the industry. So we are very happy that you're with us for the second day. For those partners that are dialing in, we have a very distinguished panel of VIP guests with us today. And it's my pleasure to welcome our panelists. Some of them are returning, others are new. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce them at a general level, and then I'm going to turn the time back over to each of them to break the ice a little bit and let us know a little bit more about themselves. And for you, our viewing audience of partners around the world, to hear a little bit from the very people that keep you engaged and employed. So in no order of importance, in the sense that they're all very important. Let me start out with Brenda Perry. I think David is running a little bit late. Brenda Perry is no stranger to FLI, needs no introduction. She is, from this panel, the only non-lawyer. She is a CFO, and she's a VP for a privately owned company. She will give you more detail about her in a couple of minutes. Brenda has been to many of our events every year for the last few years since we partnered with Bray International. And so we'll hear from Brenda quite a bit later. Neil Loy is a GC to Vital Strategies. She's a new member of the family in terms of FLI, but Vital Strategies has been with us for a number of years. So we're very excited to have Neil with us. Evan Slavitt is someone that, again, needs very little introduction. Evan is the GC of AVX Corporation, which is a group company to Kyocera. He will also tell us more about himself in a few minutes. I've had the pleasure to have Evan as a member of the GC channel roster of interviewees or distinguished interviewees. And we had a fantastic interview with Evan and got to learn a lot more about him. So we'll hear more about him in a minute. Then we have Christine Filosa. Christine is the Senior VP and GC of EDC, which is the Education Development Center. It's an incredible company, NGO, that we'll hear more about her in a minute. Also a relative newcomer to FLI, so we're excited about that. And then we have Amy Flackney. Amy has been a friend of FLI for going into about 3 years. We work with her in exotic jurisdictions. It's a private company, and they specialize in very niche markets for the oil and gas industry. So with that in mind, let me go back and let each of these distinguished panelists introduce themselves and just share a little bit of their background so that we can start the conversation going. We'll go back to Brenda. Brenda?
Good afternoon. As Orlando mentioned, I'm the CFO of a privately held company, Bray International. We are in many countries internationally with about 85 locations around the world. We're a manufacturer and distributor of flow control products, specifically valves and actuation. And the company was started in 1986. Our founder is still active and the chairman and CEO of the company. The company has grown fivefold since I've been with the business, 18 years now, coming in July. And so many of those countries were startups that I personally assisted with, and was because of my responsibilities covering legal as well as human resources and finance and accounting. It tends to facilitate things as we open new locations. But under my responsibilities, as I mentioned, there's been legal, and it was just recently, I believe in 2018, that with the growth of the company and the breadth of it as well, we added our first internal general counsel, Jeff Hopkins. And so we're very happy to have him on board. And so we share the responsibility of our legal cases, and he does the heavy lifting now instead of me. So
Great.
it's a pleasure to be on the board this morning, and thank you for letting me participate.
Thanks, Brenda. Neil?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nil Loy. I'm the General Counsel of Vital Strategies and new to the FLI family. Vital Strategies, for those of you who don't know, it's a nonprofit based in the US focused on strengthening public health systems. So health is definitely the hot topic of the day, and we're very active in fighting COVID all over the world. We partner closely with private donors as well as the US federal government and local governments all over the world. We're in about 70 countries on every continent. And we do a lot of interesting work. As I moved over to Vital Strategies, I came from ACT Associates, which also plays in a little bit of a broader mission-based space and operated in about 80 to 90 countries. I personally helped set up operations in about 40 different countries. So very, very active all over the world in crazy countries that sometimes are even difficult to spell. I think the bottom line for me is, I do so much work overseas with a very, very lean team. I really, really rely on partners like yourselves to help me with legal advice and our legal needs in any location.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Let's go to Evan. Evan, you're muted.
The only things to know about me that might be useful is I was a trial lawyer for 30 years before joining AVX. I've been the general counsel of this company, both when it was independent from Kyocera and now. It's a multinational manufacturing company. And I also do arbitrations for the AAA on the side. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Evan, as to be expected, he's not going to monopolize introductory, but I have a very lengthy introduction for Evan, and I'm gonna pick on him later on. But great to have him in the panel. Christine.
Sure, good afternoon and good evening. So I'm Christine Filosa. I'm EDC's general counsel, and EDC is a smallish not-for-profit. We're in about right now about 20 different countries, and we focus on basic education, health, and economic opportunities worldwide. We partner with a lot of local ministries of education, and most of our funding on the international side is from the United States Agency for International Development. I've worn many hats at EDC, been there for 18 years. I'm currently the general counsel. Similar to Nil, I am new to the FLI family, but rely a lot on our partners, and I use the word partner importantly because I think that is what I need in terms of legal advice and strategic partnerships as we work through some of these complicated regions.
Great, thank you. And then we'll close with Amy. Amy.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amy Flackney. I'm general counsel at Aspect Energy. I've been with FLI since I took this position. My background was not international, and as Orlando stated in my introduction, we are in a lot of jurisdictions, looking at a lot of deals. It's a small private entrepreneurial company, and when we decide we want to do something, we move very quickly. So I'm often sending Orlando panicked emails about needing help in a new jurisdiction where I know nothing. And FLI has just been invaluable for me and for our company because we're able to find trusted advisors really quickly, and people who can help in not just the legal side, but sort of on a broader scope, and that's been really valuable to us.
Great, thank you. By the way, I mean, when Amy says she sends me little notes, most of the places that she wants us to find, they're not even countries. They're just like regions of countries. But anyway, it's great to have this stellar panel. I think we're going to have to excuse David, which has some, we're trying to find out what happened. So we're going to go to the next slide and kind of let you see a little bit of what we are going to talk about. This is just a framework, and judging from what happened this morning, we ended up in a place much, much different than where we started out. And it was fantastic because it was questions and answers between the panelists themselves, challenges, people that agree or disagree with each other, but also the questions that came from the audience were fabulous. So we're really excited about that as well. And I think, judging from this morning, we might end up with a little more time on the Q&A, given that this panel is larger, because those are fun questions coming from the audience, and they're able to type them or they're able to raise their hand. And then later on the Q&A section, we will have them real time so you can see their faces. So let me kick this off by asking all of you this question, which requires a little bit of gesticulation here. So what just happened here? We've been at it for 18 months or 16 months, this pandemic thing, and the world is a different place. So lessons learned, are we still in crisis mode? Are we beginning to see the light? Have we changed sort of irreparably, that there is no turning back in terms of the working habits? Let me start out with, I'll just kick it off with Evan. Evan, what just happened? I mean, are we in a different space altogether in terms of your in-house legal departments and the way you look at the world of external counsel?
I think where we are is we're probably in about 2025. And by that, I mean that we're now where we probably would have been in another 4 or 5 years. AVX, my department, the lawyers who work for me, have all had to adapt very quickly to virtual meetings, virtual work, other ways of working on documents collegially and the like. And I think the world was drifting in that direction, but I think it would not possibly have gotten there as fast. This is the longest period of time in my adult life that I have not traveled. I'm certainly going to start traveling more, but I think that the goals of traveling and some of the things that I traveled for will now be permanently changed. So to me, that's really what's happened. We've accelerated a developmental process that was going there, but certainly not going there this fast.
Okay, so we're in 2025. That means that all of us are 4 years older than we would have been otherwise. Do we have any that agree or disagree with that? Or do you feel that we've accelerated so quickly that we are now where we would have or might have ended up at the snail pace that we were going 3 or 4 years ago? Christine, you look very puzzled. What do you say?
Oh, I'm just thinking because earlier today I had a conversation with our CFO and our CEO about, as all organizations are, what's the future of work and the need for the physical space. And, it's sort of where we want to be, right? And I don't think we can go back to where we were at all, but what does that look like? So everybody's talking about hybrid model. And there's some pros and cons about this hybrid model and what it means, and equity certainly comes into play. And so one of the things we were discussing is, what is the purpose of coming into a space, and are we better off with just some sort of collaborative meeting space and use your home or wherever you're working from as your thinking space? So, I think that I agree with Evan. You asked if we're in crisis mode. I don't think we're in crisis mode, but we're definitely in reactionary mode. And we're trying to flip it over to be more proactive and more deliberate in our thinking.
Okay, so maybe, it was interesting because this morning our Asia panel they rebuff that. They say, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean we're not in crisis mode? I mean, have you read the news? We're in Singapore, we're in Hong Kong, we're in South Korea, and they're having the second or third wave there. So Brenda, you know what's going on in India. Are we still in crisis mode?
We are in certain areas of the world for sure. And, you know, while I agree with Evan's comment about accelerating where we inevitably would end up, I think that we wouldn't have ended up here because we had a lot of, I would say, strongly held beliefs at the senior management level that people needed to be in the office. That's how you kept track of them and made sure they were actually working or contributing. And so I think it's a positive turn that our owners have now seen that, well, yes, we can actually be very productive working from home, but yet there is a real lack of face-to-face communication and mentoring that we're just prevented from doing. And so we're struggling with that now of how to go back to this hybrid mode. It's actually, I think, going to be harder than what we've actually experienced in the last 15 months. Because to your point, how do you make it fair? How do you balance it between the different departments? And if you wanted to have a meeting, then you have to have certain people there. And so I think it's going to be harder to return to work than it was to leave work at the start of this pandemic.
And one of the questions that was tied to that, which I think kind of flared up all kinds of reactions from the panel and from the audience, was that someone actually posed the question to the panel how they felt about mandatory vaccination or mandatory health rules to return to the workplace, you know. And so we went off on a tangent about, wait a minute, you know, as a company, we have a duty to provide a healthy environment, safety environment, so we have to compel. And then someone else said, well, there's all kinds of privacy issues and you can't force this and you can't force that. I like to ask Neil, who's had a very global experience. How do you, okay, if you take Brenda's comment at face value, that is going to be harder to return. And mind you, it's a lot easier if you live in suburbia where you have a beautiful big house. But if you're in an apartment in Hong Kong and you have, you know, 2 kids that you have to mentor, it's a completely different ballgame. Working from home, it's an ordeal. So assuming that going back to work is going to be harder, what are your feelings about this compulsory vaccination and compulsory sort of norms to ensure that those coming back are healthy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think organizations all over are struggling with this. You know, as Brenda said, we have operations in places that are in the heat of second, third waves that are really, really bad, like India and Brazil. So it's almost like the tale of two cities. You know, on one hand, we're still in crisis mode in a lot of our countries, just trying to help them through the pandemic and the realities of what's going on the ground. And then on the other hand, we have offices in locations that are starting to open up, that are further along in the vaccine scale. So we're trying to account for kind of both of those universes, really on a country by country location basis. Here in the States, you know, most of our folks are getting through the vaccine process. And so we're almost kind of walking the middle line. So we had already called for parent planning purposes, for everybody's planning purposes, at the very beginning of the year, that for 2021, if you want to work remotely, that's your call. And we're not changing that direction, even though the vaccine rollout is kind of hitting good strides here in the States. So for the rest of the year, if you want to work wherever you want to work, that's okay by us. We did take a survey to say, should we go ahead and open the office space for, like you said, the parent with little ones running around, or you just want some peace and quiet and you want to come into the office. So what we're leaning towards is a fall reopening of our domestic offices on a completely volunteer basis. But to come into the office, you will have to be vaccinated. So that's the trend we're heading to kind of manage the safety concerns but the ability to have another location should you choose that.
And what that's creating, it's a conversation because as the gatekeepers of the legal departments, your corporate clients are going to come to your door and they're going to say, Amy, what do we do? Do we force people? Yes, no. What are the, are there going to be claims on either side? You forced me. I didn't want to, like I was talking, I think it was Brenda, we were talking about The Incredibles. Remember that scene where Mr. Incredible saved someone that didn't want to be saved, and then they got sued and they retired all the supers, right? So, Amy, what will you tell your corporate client when they come knocking your door and they say, should we compel our employees, yes or no? What are the thoughts on that?
Well, our personal situation and aspect has sort of obviated the need for that discussion because in Denver, we have most of our employees are here in Denver or in Hungary. And in the Denver office, it's a small number of employees. And we anecdotally know that already we are above 85% vaccination within the company. And so it's really not made that conversation necessary. And we have asked the employees to come back on June 8th. There's been that message has not been received incredibly well by the employee population, but we have asked them to come back, and we feel like at the percentage vaccination, and it might continue to move up that we're at, it's just not something that we need to do. In talking with the community, I know that there are a lot of companies in Denver and Boulder that have required vaccinations in order to work at the company. That they're asking people to come back, and that in order to come back, you have to be vaccinated. And I know that's a position that's getting adopted a lot here locally. And frankly, that position doesn't give me pause as an attorney. I not from a legal perspective. I think people maybe wrestle with it from other perspectives, but I think it's a supportable position.
Okay, and do you all, this is for everyone, anybody who wants to jump in here, do you anticipate that we're going to see, not just in America, which is the land of the litigious plenty, but around the world, are you anticipating, are you bracing for all kinds of lawsuits? You forced me, you didn't force me, you provided an environment that was not safe because you didn't want to compel the others. Evan, what do you think? Are we going to see litigation rise up since you're such a litigator-minded person?
My view is probably not as much as people might have thought. The states we operate in have all passed laws that basically give us immunity against lawsuits in the absence of reckless or intentional conduct. And so if you exclude the United States, most of the other countries are much less litigious. So I think that there may be a few situations, but they're going to be driven not just by a COVID impact or a vaccination question, but some kind of interplay between COVID or vaccination and labor relations problems or religious litigation or something where it's already kind of there, and this just adds to the mix.
That's an interesting point. For there are right now 44 countries signed up and watching us. And I'm sure that they're wondering, they may already know through us, because obviously they're acting for you and helping you out. But I'm sure they would love to hear from your vantage point whether your business weathered the storm, okay, survived, okay, thrived, or seized on other opportunities. In other words, how has this 18 months of fog resulted to your bottom line? And since we're talking numbers, let me hone in on Brenda again. How, what are companies around the world reporting it? That one of the things we talked in the dry run is that there is a kind of a bullish sense of renewed M&A activity, that the numbers are looking robust, there's stockpiles of cash, new economies, and so on and so forth. How do you see it, Brenda?
Well, in our particular case, I think our top line number was off less than 5% year over year. So we didn't, suffer a big downturn. That did vary by region of the world, however. but our management is always taking the approach in difficult times like this is to try to capture market share while other major competitors may be struggling with Wall Street or heavily devoted to oil and gas or a particular industry. And so we were probably more affected on the bottom line standpoint because, again, our owner took a very conservative approach to managing our employees' safety and health. And so the best example I can give you is in India. From the get-go, we had petitioned the government for essential business status because our products go into water treatment and energy and those sort of applications. And we made it mandatory that our employees all stay in a hotel. And even though that meant they were away from their families, at least we could control their environment much more so in the Indian areas that we operate in. And so those costs added several $1 million of operating expenses to our bottom line without question. But overall, we just haven't seen that much of an impact. And we are seeing a lot of uptick in business right now in terms of active quotations and projects that were held up during the last 18 months out of just conservative behavior from our customers. And they're starting to let loose those now.
And thank you, Brenda, because that's really what I wanted to ask the other panelists. I mean, is that really what's happening out there? People are now saying, hey, you know what? It's like we were waiting for that 13th wave to break the tide so we could get to shore. And now we're going to go after relentless growth and new opportunities. What do you see, Neil? What do you see from your side?
It's interesting. It's almost a little bit of reverse for us. So we're in the public health space. And when COVID hit, we were well positioned to help not only the United States, but governments all over the world with their battle with COVID. We have the former head of the CDC with our organization. So actually, we pivoted very, very early on. We moved staff from certain epidemics over to the COVID fight, and we grew like crazy. We almost doubled our size. We almost doubled our revenue as we have been on kind of the front lines of all of this. I'd say at this point, though, it's almost a little bit of business as usual. Part of our rapid growth was with a group that always had been, the plan had always been to incubate and spin off. So we're continuing with those plans, and normal M&A activity continues, as well as just kind of regular course of business.
I'm sure that the other panelists are thinking, boy, I wish I was in a space that pivoted so quickly and doubled in size and now seems to be growing. But obviously you are in a very special space where you are socially redeeming and trying to heal and cure and act in a lot of these countries that need your help. But I mean, what about the others who are out there, in the trenches and maybe for them, like Brenda was saying, there had to be some very tough decisions that were made during those 18 months. For you, for example, Christine, were there some moments there in those 18 months where you scratch your head and said, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to pull this off?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we are being in the education field. I think that we were able to pivot as well and having given this idea that we've had learning loss for the last year. Our education services are even more important than ever. And what we do is focus on non-formal education. So we were equipped to be able to help with some of the effects of COVID as well. But logistically and getting people to where they needed to go and how to do that was definitely a challenge. And what we found was the US, for the most part, we could all work from home and kind of chug along and the work kept going. Internationally, we actually had a different experience because of the developing countries and where we are. People were unable to work from home. Heat connectivity, just reasons why they needed to go into the office. So we had to look at each office individually. In some countries, we've had provincial offices, and we had to really be able to figure out the best mitigation measures and how to get people in, keep the work going, staggered approaches, what are the right mitigation measures, because they had to keep the show up and running for a long time. And we kind of had a little bit more of a luxury in the US from being able to not have to deal with some of those issues.
Thank you. Well, obviously everyone has been impacted. There was a moment in this morning's panel where we had to laugh because there were three industries that had nothing to do with each other, and yet during the dialogue, they had everything to do with each other because Medtronic's medical devices were being transported by trucks that had Maxion wheels on it, and the logistical delivery company was Flexport. So it was like interconnectivity at its most. So let's move on to the, obviously we know that the impact is there, and we could talk just about that for a long time. And learning from this morning, our audience, our partners wanted to hear a little bit more. So I'm going to jump right into one that I know is very dear to most of you. In fact, I don't say all of you because of the implication of the statement, but do you feel that as a result of this exuberance in terms of the migration or transition into a much more technology savvy world that we find ourselves in, hence this conference, that also the regulators have caught on to that? And now you've got DOJ working with SEC, working with the SFO, working with Interpol, working with everybody else, and they're circling the wagons. So they're getting their act together. And do you feel that that's creating issues for you because over-regulation or overzealous regulation is a stumbling block? Let me start with Evan, because he and I have had this discussion before. So what is the reaction out there from your perspective, Evan, about these regulatory bodies now becoming much more entangled with each other?
Well, part of it is that I think they're becoming somewhat more connected to each other in ways that they never were before. Not so much because they're actually able to cooperate better, which they can't, but because they now have common databases and they have access to information that they didn't before. It used to take a package of information approximately 2 months plus forever to get from Washington, D.C. to Interpol in Europe. And now they can actually get it there in some reasonable period of time. So it's the connectivity on information, not that they've learned how to cooperate better. The other problem is they've decided that there are a lot more things that they want to regulate that are internet or electronic. And the problem is the decision to regulate them is not commensurate with the ability or the knowledge about what they're trying to accomplish. And so I believe it's substantially burdening companies like mine. I mean, and I hate to ride my hobby horse, the whole GDPR situation, and I defer to people on this panel who are actually data privacy experts, but the whole GDPR effort is inspired by this connectivity and this information, but it has gone, in my view, horribly wrong because the regulators don't really understand what they're trying to regulate or the costs of their regulation. And so I think that this is going to consistently burden the companies. And the good news for the FLI people is that has substantially increased my need for legal counsel to try to understand these incoherent, inconsistent, and generally silly regulatory structures that keep crashing up on my shores.
That was an unintended fishing for a compliment there, Evan. That was not the purpose of the question, but thank you. Thank you. And of course, the aim here is the rush to solutions, right? We all are trying to pivot. I've heard that quite a bit recently, as fast as we can, and try to come up with solutions to the new normal. And so the question is, do you see in your space regulators doing the same, and they're rushing to regulate, like Evan said, things that they don't understand yet? And that's going to complicate matters to no end. Christine, you're nodding.
Yes, I think that that's right. I think given the space that we are in, which is a lot of federal contracting, that I'm used to regulations, but I'm seeing more and more for sure. And it's hard to be able to say, in one respects, the government is saying, here's an award and we want you to go in this country and we want you to be there yesterday and start up. But at the same time, you have to comply with all these regulations. And so I don't know how familiar people are with, for instance, Section 889 that talks about certain Chinese technology companies and not being able to work with them. And I just don't think it's been thought through holistically enough, that it's really hard to try to do both, live in both worlds.
Okay, anybody else agree with that? I mean, is that what you're seeing in your space, in your area? I see some nodding there as well. Because the concern this morning was that it was spun differently. It wasn't like Evan was saying, look, some of these regulators don't even know what they're doing. This morning is they're rushing. They may know a little, but they're rushing to it. And in the process, they come up with all these obstacles, which again creates work for us. That's true, but it makes your lives very complicated. Anyone else that want to venture in that before we switch subjects?
I'll add on to that. I share Evan's pain. I think within my first week of joining Vital, I was on the phone with FLI trying to unpack some of the data privacy issues I had seen. It really does feel like that. I think it's such a buzzy legal concept right now that I see country after country after country just scrambling to pass legislation in this area. And a lot of them, sadly, looking to the GDPR for guidance, which I think makes it very, very hard for businesses to comply, to understand, and to, especially in this global world, knit kind of together a framework that allows us to do so without imposing such a huge cost burden.
Great, thank you. Very well said. Let me jump into something that is just as compelling because I've had the opportunity to work very closely with some of you, and I keep hearing this recurring theme. And I would love our audience of now 46 countries to hear from you. But it's couched in the agenda as, do you feel now, whether we're 5 years older, according to Evan, and I hope we look this good 5 years from now, or whether it's just that we are in coming out of the fog. The issue is that the gatekeepers, the GCs, the AGCs, and in the case of Brenda, the CFOs and VPs of finance, do you feel that the expectation from your stakeholders now is that you better know your client much, much better than you did before because it's a different set of rules? Is that where you are now? Do you feel like the expectations are higher? Do you feel like, you need to know your corporate management and board's expectations much better than before? What are your thoughts on that, Brenda?
Well, when you're referring to your clients, I guess in our case, our customers, is that the focus of your question, or is it internal customers?
It's a sin of the industry. When we talk to lawyers, that our corporate client is your CFO, so that would be Craig, and it would be the board. Do you feel that this COVID has accelerated the way in which they expect you now to know the ins and outs of the company much better than before?
Well, I think from my perspective, and having been part of the company when it was much smaller and growing with it, I mean, I've always been really very intimately involved in and knowledgeable of the business itself. But I think where we're seeing a lot more interaction and play is, well, we did this in 1970 and, well, we can't do that anymore today. Or, now we have additional regulations around everything from conflict minerals to protecting against slave labor. And, those are all sorts of certifications and supply chain issues that we're dealing with right now, and having to go on record with their customers of being in compliance with that. And so where before we could easily say, of course, our company does not have any of those issues, but then having to push down 3 and 4 layers into the supply chain is almost to the point of ridiculous. And so it's very difficult to manage those type of regulations today for our company.
Okay, Amy, would you agree with that? Do you see that the relationship and let me take the rabbit out of the hat. What happened this morning with the other panel is that they felt that this acceleration to digital technology, this new working from home, this remote teleworking, this other aspects, that they felt like their stakeholders are now looking to them, not as external, the legal department that has to be the remediation team that comes to put out the fire, but they were saying to us, we are now part of the strategy at the executive level. They're really, legal has kind of raised the bar because of the 18 months of COVID. I mean, do you agree with that, Neil?
I think it was already headed in that direction. I don't think COVID necessarily accelerated that or changed that. I think just the nature of law and the nature of GCs have increasingly become more of a strategic partner to the business than just pure legal advisor. So to me, I always saw that as kind of part and parcel of what I did. And I don't feel like there's an increased expectation or a different expectation than before.
Amy, do you buy that, or you have a slight view?
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I mean, I think that's always been the expectation at my company. It's a small company. It's an entrepreneurial company. Legal has always been part of sort of the strategy team and, weighing the different paths that we might go down. And you've heard me say this before, Orlando. And so one of the things that, I'm always looking for in terms of legal advisors is someone who takes on that broader role for me, because that's certainly part of being general counsel at a small company that's doing a lot of deals. I want counsel who's helping me think through those, helping me find the deals, helping me evaluate them from more than just the strict legal perspective.
Okay, so maybe that's a perfect segue. Thank you, Amy, for us to steer this a little bit. I just need to let you know that before you know it, the first hour is over. I mean, that's how exciting these things are. But let's just kind of steer it into the strategic partnership that you think FLI can provide you. And the idea of the conference is not a parade of compliments because you think we're doing a good job. The question is, the 46 countries now in the viewing audience need to hear from you what it is that we're doing right, what is it that we could do better, and how does the strategic partnership get stronger? And so far, they've heard a few things from you, which is really great. But let me couch it this way. How are you using currently outside counsel that bridges that gap and it makes your internal in-house legal team have an extension outside through the various offices that we have around the world? Evan, let me pick on you a little bit, because we're doing a lot of things in difficult markets as well. Where do you see the strategic value of having this layer of former GCs working with local counsel to aid your needs?
One of the challenges of being in a lot of countries is that we have to deal with the cultural issues, not just the generic cultural issues, but also with the local counsel understanding what my needs are as a lawyer here in the United States and as a lawyer for a company that's owned by a company headquartered in Japan. And so one of the hardest things is to get everybody focused on what I need. And I hate to keep sounding like it's what I need, but the reality is that's what your job is just to focus what I need. So trying to put together multi-country efforts like a customs and trade manual, or trying to focus on some company-wide initiative like GDPR, these are things where the outside law firms can either be helpful, and I'm not talking about their expertise, but I'm talking about turning out a work product that is responsive to what I'm looking for. They can either be helpful or not helpful. And the challenge is to translate the assignments so that they understand not just what the technical legal assignment is, but they understand what the work product is, what my schedule is, how this is going to interact with other countries. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. FLI has made progress in this, but I think it's an inevitable and consistent challenge for any multi-country operation, because they're used to doing work product for people in their countries. Let's be realistic. And so changing their worldview to understand what work product is for me, I think is still one of the biggest challenges that I face dealing with lawyers in a variety of countries. Just as a simple matter of recognizing that if I give them an assignment, and the way I give the assignment and the way the country laws are, the way things are there, it just doesn't quite dovetail. They have to understand, I want them to challenge me and call me and say, this doesn't make sense. But I recognize that in a lot of countries, that kind of relationship is not one that is as traditional or as normal, if you will, as it is in the United States. And recognizing that even in the United States, there are a lot of lawyers who just take assignments. They don't act as a significant partner pushing back when needed to be, or saying, I don't understand when they need to get clarification. So I'm sorry to be long-winded about this, but to me, that's probably the heartland challenge, one that FLI is moving towards resolving, but one that I think remains for FLI and for all the other networking, or in fact, any other law firm outside the home country of the company they're working for.
Thank you, Evan. And that's the crux of this, right? And it came up this morning, by the way, that while a local, and I'm speaking right now to my 46 brethren and sisters that are in the community of FLI, while they're used to, and understandably, I mean, Evan said, look, we get it. You are the law firm in that country. So if you're with the FLI family, that means that you're among the best, and that's great. But you need to start thinking regionally and globally if possible. And notice that Evan was very humble about saying this is the space that FLI is gravitating, because obviously we want to be able to do that. And I think all of you feel that the one of the building blocks is that whatever we do for you in country A can and should percolate to country B, so that we're building blocks there. And I think that's how you see us, but I'd love to hear from you because I want our audience to hear it more. And I know that, for example, in the case of Amy, she even wants to raise the bar and said, listen, FLI community lawyers, great, get it. You're a very good attorney. Now I need you to start thinking like an entrepreneur and find me deals in your country. Let's hear from Christine, for example. How can, in your mind, how do you feel that the external counsel can transcend that know-how, the local know-how that is important to you, and yet pass it on regionally so that you benefit from bigger bandwidth?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Evan said. And one of the issues for me always is talking about risk. And so I think we said this in the dry run, I can certainly now with technology, I can look up the laws and translate them and understand them. But what I'm really looking for is for somebody to help me to strategize about the best way to either minimize the risk or just act as that partner, and not so much about giving me the law and citing the law, because I can do that on my own. I can probably find that, but I really need somebody that's going to get in there and assess the risk with me, because that's usually what I have to report back out, and tell me what I don't know. is sort of what Evan was saying. Tell me what roadblocks I have to think about coming up ahead, and tell me sort of where I should be going, and just that kind of discretion, judgment discussion about risk as opposed to the law.
And maybe on that vein, if I could exploit a comment that was made to me during one of the GC interviews, and he is in the panel, and since I say he, you now know who he is. He said, one of the greatest things that an FLI lawyer can do for me in my day job is to pass on work. If this is not your bailiwick, if this is not your competency, if this is not your time, then pass on it, because then your credibility rises with me. But there was another equally important point, and that was that, as Christine said, it's all about risk management. In many instances, you are not going to have the time to digest pages upon pages of notes. And this is why all these alerts and newsletters are not beneficial. And I remember that he told me that he gets a very short window to report to his management team. So it has to be succinct, clear bullet points. Like Christina was saying, tell me what I don't know and don't give me a lot of fluff. Do you agree with that, Amy? Is that same kind of space where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times we're moving very quickly in a jurisdiction, and it's not just accessing the law and, voluminous pages of what the regulations are, but helping strategize about a path to quickly assess whether we can do what we want to do, whether the cost benefit analysis, whether it's worth it to try to do what are we coming up with something crazy? A lot of times the answer at Aspect is yes, that's totally crazy and you shouldn't do it. And we need to come to those decision points quickly. But I just, because you mentioned it and then passed on, I agree wholeheartedly with Evan on the piece of passing on work that is not your expertise. And I've had attorneys at FLI do it, and I just really value it and respect it so much, because there's nothing that impairs a lawyer's credibility more, or a law firm's credibility more, right? When you say, hey, I need someone who knows something specifically about this. Do you have someone? And they say, oh yeah, we've got a guy. And then the guy or the gal that they put on is really just kind of a smart person scrambling to catch up. And that's not what I need. Like in a particular situation, I might need someone who knows specifically about X issue and Y jurisdiction, and it's a finite, discrete assignment. And I will continue working with the people who passed on it and said, this isn't ours. You got to find someone else, and value them so much more, and continue to go back to them if they're open and honest about not knowing something.
Amy, that can really backfire, because I had a situation in which the people on the ground knew more than, the lawyer was saying one thing and the people on my project team were saying the other, and the people on the project team were right. And then that just destroys all credibility with me, with that firm. And so it can do so much damage that you have to be really careful about it. And sometimes it's not a right or wrong answer. It's maybe just an approach, but say that it's just an approach. And this is our recommendation, as opposed to this is the path. So it can really backfire with a lot of consequences. Sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. I hope, and I know that our audience, our community right now are listening to you, and you have them and just, they're suspended in animation, because they're actually hearing it from your voices, from your mouths, and the things that are important to them. I remember the instance that Amy is referring to. They cry bitter tears after they say, okay, we're going to have to pass so that Amy can respect us. But that's true. And that's what Evan was saying, is that, it's better for your integrity to speak for itself. And perhaps you lost a transaction, but then you made an ally for life. And that's what Amy and now Christina are saying. Credibility is the oxygen of our business. And once you exhaust it, you can't breathe anymore. And it's at times very difficult to tell you all, our distinguished panel, that perhaps we don't agree with you on this one. And Evan says, that's what I want you to tell me, rather than whatever the client says. So perhaps on that vein, Neil, how do you see it from your side? And then I'm going to go to Brandon, the same question.
It's a really good question, and I echo my panelists' comments. I started off in the large law firms, and I spent 10 years as a litigator and writing lots of long, very pretty memos. And it wasn't until I got in-house that I had a different perspective on kind of what my needs from outside law firms really truly are. I think at this level, the way to maybe think about yourselves is think about yourselves as an extension of our legal teams, our in-house legal teams, and you are a senior member of the team. What we go to you for is we want your legal advice. We want it to be done to kind of pull everything together. The panel is saying we want it in a practical way. Baseline is telling me what the law is, but don't tell me what the law is as it applies to other industries or other things that don't relate to my world. Know my business, know who I am as a GC and how I like to take in the advice. Give it to me in practical form so I know very quickly what is the law, how does it apply to me, what do I need to know to kind of troubleshoot the issue. That to me is so valuable. And I'll tell you, I've moved around and I keep good law firms that can give it to me in that way with me, no matter where I go. It builds such incredible loyalty when the advice can be really tailored to us as an organization and to me as a GC.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Brenda, what are your thoughts on that point?
Well, I absolutely agree with Neil's comments there. Nothing more frustrating for me to provide a question or a scope and then to have the answer come back off base. And so clearly the idea or the request wasn't properly defined, or the other side didn't understand it correctly. And so oftentimes, and most times, I insist with Orlando of having an opening call or a direct conversation with the law firm at the very front of the question to make sure that they understand what it is I'm really looking for and they don't go down unnecessary rabbit holes. And typically in our business, and certainly with my owner, he wants to answer it tomorrow. He doesn't allow the luxury of a 1 or 2 week response time in many cases. And so I will say, though, that the FLI app has really accelerated that communication, and I can just type on there, hey, where are we at with this? Or how are you coming? Or do you have any questions? And in particular with language barriers, we just recently have been trying to open a location in Brazil as well as Uruguay. And at the same time, acquiring a portion of our minority interests in Argentina. So having 3 Latin American countries up in the air all at once, and then dealing with the related COVID delays there has been quite a challenge also. But keeping that on point is critical to not just controlling the cost of your questions and your project, but also to make sure you're getting the answer you need to make the proper decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. It's interesting, though, because our partners from Latin America are all watching, and now they heard it from you that when you say I want to talk to them, it's not because you don't love them, that's because you need a quick answer because your stakeholders are chewing your ear. Because every time I come to them and say, Brenda wants to have a call, they go, oh, no, not again. But that's what it is. And I think it's very practical.
Orlando, can I add one note to what Brenda just said?
Absolutely. Take it away.
In addition, this explains to some extent also why it's so important for outside counsel, particularly newer outside counsel, to really get to know and understand the business that that I'm in or that we're in. Because in addition to helping them force us to give them an assignment that they understand that is contextualized, it also helps them understand what is likely to be our key concerns and what we care about and what we don't care about. As a manufacturing company, and one that is not a data company, there's lots of things that happen in various companies that are about Facebook or Google that really aren't that important to us. But if I give an assignment about, let's say again, GDPR, and I get back a page and a half about what would be important if I were mailing out tons of stuff to customers every day, like I was a retail business, that means that they really don't understand my business. And partly I should have explained it, but partly it means that they're just going either into their standard response, which includes stuff I don't care about, or they really don't understand my business and they've given me a page and a half on something that means that they don't understand that I'm a total, almost 100% B2B. And that just emphasizes the importance, COVID or not, of people getting to know not just me and my legal questions, but having at least some basic understanding of what I do, what the company does, how we do things, and where we operate, so that the advice can be focused. And if I don't give a contextualized assignment, as Brenda pointed out, they know enough to say, you're a manufacturing company. Are you sure you want me to do X, Y, and Z? Or why don't you want me to do A, B, and C, which for you is going to be just as important. And that's why I continually harp on this fact that I'm looking for outside counsel, not just to be assignment takers, but to be partners and colleagues in trying to turn out the best work product possible for my internal clients.
I couldn't have said that better. And I think Evan and Brenda just basically defined the FLI value prop, right? One of the things that you all know that we've started months ago, possibly already over a year ago, is that we have these systematic routine calls with all of you. In some cases, for some of you, we have those weekly calls to do exactly what Evan just said. You know, you're going to be a better FLI lawyer if you know better my business. And I'm going to be a better GC to my corporate client and my management if I have a better partner. So the word escapes me, but it's a symbiotic kind of a relationship where Evan is going out of his way. He's investing, and we value that. He's investing his time, and so are all of you, because we're having these monthly calls, and in some cases even sooner, with all of you to get to know those issues that Evan was talking about. So that when we come back to you, I think Brenda illustrated very well. You know, sometimes if the response comes out of scope, it's not going to help me. So I don't have time to even ask them to revise the memo. So get them on the phone. Let's have a Zoom call. And then in 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I can then help the local counsel understand better my pain. If I could go back to, there was one point that was made by Neil that I just can't let it go. This is beautiful. It says, I used to be on the other side. I was the private lawyer, big expensive law firm, and I used to write these beautiful memos. And now she's atoning for her sins. And she's on the other side, and now she knows that there is this irresistible urge for external counsel to write lots of stuff. Brothers and sisters of FLI, those days are gone, whether COVID has accelerated it or not, or whether we were all going to ultimately end up there. So this brings me into whether technology, and let's define what that means, really is helping your day jobs. Because if it isn't, then it's just another gadget. And if it is, then we want to make it better. Now, Brenda, you started out by saying that for you, this is accelerated because you can go in there and very quickly look at the countries, and then you can comment, you can upload, you can do calls, whatever. But let me ask some of the others, and I'll come back to you, Brenda, but some of the other newer ones that are starting to use the platform. So let me pick on Neil for a little bit, because she started recently. Neil, immediate reactions. Did we get it right? Do you like it? Useful, friendly? What do you think?
I love the concept, that I can kind of very quickly see what I have farmed out, see the status, see the work product, and even have the correspondence. I think it's been a little glitchy in the rollout in making sure that all of my issues are listed on the platform and all of the correspondence is up to date. So I think it's just some growing pains in getting all of my stuff onto the platform, but I'm very excited about the idea of once it's all there, being able to use it, and especially with time zone differences, being able to facilitate the conversations through the platform. Very excited about the idea.
Okay, great. Okay, so back to your brand that since you started it, what is it that you feel, because you got your business folks in there, you've got finance folks in there, you've got the legal team in there, I mean, everybody, you've got the in-country managers in there. Why do you feel the need to get everybody on the platform? What was it that attracted you?
Well, I think that just the speed of communication was difficult. Neil mentioned the time zone differences and managing that. That's a really big deal. You know, if you're losing 24 hours at a shot before you're communicating with China or Singapore or Australia, then, you know, that really slows the progress of anything you're working on. And, you know, as we started out, it was only myself and RGC. And then as, you know, many of our legal projects are not purely legal. Actually, most of them are not. It's either something tax related in a given country, or establishing bank accounts, or changing parents' legal structures and this sort of thing. And so oftentimes it does cross over between both the regional finance and managers, as well as our corporate staff. And so the other thing that I really appreciate about it is not having to worry about client privilege, attorney-client privilege. And so, you know, there's an automatic protection on the app that you don't necessarily, you have to be very careful on emails, of course, and everything being discoverable there. So those are some of the things that I found very helpful. I remember one of the first times I was working on it, and I said, whoa, Orlando, where's my project in Argentina? So I looked at the bottom of the page and, oh, we've got a page 2. Okay, so I know we were up to at least 2 pages of projects now that are registered on it. And we'll probably be pushing into 3 here soon. But as to your point, there's been some growing pains and some little bit of glitches, and I keep sharing those with Orlando and saying, hey, if you could just do this, this would be great.
Yeah. By the way, the wish list from Brenda, it's about this long, and
Yeah,
you know, if I could have some soft drinks in the process and an iced tea, would be wonderful. But
not quite.
Fair enough. But you know, one of the things that came out this morning, and it became an interesting conversation, was that the in-house legal teams are obviously also developing technology yourselves. So, you know, in the case of the panelists this morning, Medtronics, Flexport, and what was the other one? The 3 firms that we had there, they were talking specifically that they're spending a lot of technology money or budgets because, and this is a key I want to ask yourselves, because they're not seeing the technology being developed by the big law firms expedite the delivery and percolate into a cost savings. Is it fair to ask you whether you agree with that? Are you seeing some of the bigger law firms that are making a lot of noise, whether or not they're making strides in passing those savings on to you? Have you seen that at all? That was Max and Wheels was the other company. So when they were talking among themselves, they said, no, we don't see that. There's a lot of news about it. Evan, you are using you know, a number of external counsels that you've established trustworthy relationships over decades. Are any of these folks, any of these big law firms, sharing with you tools that are actually having an impact to your bottom line?
The reality is that most of the tools that they share with us improve communication, improve data exchange, maybe give us some other kinds of advantages. But that only has an indirect effect on the cost savings. In other words, there are very few things that most of the big law firms do that are specifically designed to reduce my costs. That's just the reality. So if it reduced my costs by making it faster for people to exchange documents or to co-edit a document, that may have some incidental impact on the bill. But the reality is it's not really a cost-driven improvement. They're making the legal experience better, not really making, saying, here's how you're going to save money. And in many respects, and I don't mean to sound critical, but in many respects, the bigger law firms seem to compensate for that by having billing rates that are notably higher than other firms. And so I'm not sure I detect that on balance, I'm better off by these tools from a cost perspective. I am to some extent from a legal experience as a general counsel, but I don't generally view any of these things that they do as being designed to save me money in any functional way.
That's very interesting that you say that, because right now, I mean, we go to the ACC every year. In fact, we got to know some of you during the ACC conferences, and there is all these technology vendors out there, pushing their wares. And then you read in the American Law Review and various other correspondences that technology is here to stay. It's going to revolutionize the legal industry. But it's interesting that Evan, what you said, I think you're resonating what everybody's thinking, that perhaps the experience of the delivery is going to have an impact positively, but it's not going to impact the cost. So then how does that work? How does technology improve your day jobs and your lives? Christine, how do you see it?
Maybe it's from where I sit, but I just don't see it improving me from my perspective from the outside legal world. In fact, and if anything, I kind of like to go old school and have that one-on-one and pick up the phone and call sometimes. But I do 100% agree with Brenda. Getting that not waiting that day and getting that instant communication is really important. But I can't say that I've seen it at all in terms of cost savings. I completely agree with Evan.
And is that something, when I was having an interview in the GC channel a couple of weeks ago, I put the guest on the spot and I said, well, is it fair for you to expect that? Can we hold the law firms accountable and say, well, now that you've got all this technology, why don't we now benefit from better rates and cost savings? And the response was amazing, but I would like to hear whether you feel that as the gatekeepers and the GCs and HECs and CFOs of your companies, whether you have the right and the entitlement to hold these vendors to accountability and say, hey, we want to see some savings here by way of costs in your fees. Amy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, when you're buying legal services, you're buying a product and people price a product and you can choose to buy it or not. I mean, I think one of the things about FLI that's just been really sort of a sea change is that oftentimes American lawyers use American style firms to help them wade through jurisdictions that they're not familiar with. And so you're paying this really high dollar for probably not even the best, or close to the best lawyers in that jurisdiction. And to have FLI as a platform that allows you to access really great vetted legal talent and not have to pay those price tags for that sort of sense of security has been huge for me in particular. I think on the piece of technology, it's just, to me, it's sort of all baked into the package of whether I think I'm getting good value or not. I will say that I think, in my position, I work with a lot of people who are not lawyers. I work with accountants, I work with geologists, I work with engineers. And I will preface this by saying I'm a total Luddite. I mean, we had like a wall-mounted CD player in my kitchen as our only form of music until very recently, like a very recent embarrassing date. that I can't disclose. So I'm not on the vanguard of technology, but I'm sort of horrified, not with my FLI attorneys, but a lot of law firms who are still not adopting technology. And yeah, I do like picking up the phone and having one. I mean, I think you need to think about what's meaningful and convenient for your client. But if there are 7 people on a Zoom call and you're the only person calling in, get with it. Figure out how to download the Zoom. You can do it, right? And I'm sort of surprised that my experience has been lawyers and law firms have not been particularly adept at adopting the new technology.
That's so insightful. When we had the partners only conference yesterday, and we had 2 sessions like we had today, and we showed them big data analytics. That's the one thing that we do, is we understand our industry. And Amy, you just hit it right on the nail. Even big law is not fully engaged with embracing technology, and to the extent that they do, they don't know how to apply it. And so I guess the bid that I was after wasn't a pat on the back by saying, hey, well, FLI is kind of, nailed it or cracked the code, because to your credit, it's still a bit clunky. I think Brenda was being very nice. It was a bit, glitchy, but it's getting there. We have a team of people, coders, programmers. They're working every week to make it better, to make it more smooth and easier to work with. And you will see that in transcending savings to you. That's the pledge. And to have the other vendors just say, well, it's going to be a better experience, but you're still going to get the whopping bill that we expect you to send. It's a little disingenuous. So, I'm glad that you're beginning to see it that way. We appreciate the trust that you've given us to be patient with this technology. But the only single goal in mind, and you know that because we interviewed all of you last year to tell us what you felt was important to be in that technology, is our only goal is to make that day job experience, that ability to keep up with your work as smoothly as possible and give you as much control as possible. If I now could sort of go back to the issue of where you see yourselves. This is the one thing that was very difficult in the morning, because one of our panelists asked the other, and then some of the members jumped in. Where do we see ourselves in 3 years from now? Or is that even impossible to think, because now people are thinking in 3 months from now? Where do you think we're going to be in this strategic partnership with each other, but also in the way that you're going to be managing your in-house legal departments? Let me start with Neil on that.
Tough question. I say it's all up for grabs, and it's all being shaped in real time, and a chance to kind of shape it in real time. And I am the perfect example. I'm a new GC. I'm actually hired by an organization in which I'm not in the same city. My headquarters are in New York. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Never, ever, ever would have thought about taking a job like that prior to this environment being rocked and folks really being comfortable and familiar with using remote technology. So I will tell you where I am. I'm rethinking everything and anything, and that includes top to bottom assessment of my own team in-house and how I use external counsel. And the folks that are going to convince me, are really, like I said, the folks that are going to bring value. I view all my lawyers as extensions of my team. So really being able to kind of give me the practical advice, give it to me in a user-friendly format. General counsel are incredibly busy. As you think about how you deliver advice, if you can think about it from that perspective, and I encourage all our law firms to think about it from that perspective, you don't have a ton of time. So how can you package and deliver your legal advice in a way that's meaningful, that's digestible, and doesn't really require a ton of follow-up? I think that's where the value really is going to be. Whether you use technology to do it, whether you use it old school, whether you use it through the new FLI platform, I think, I think we're open to anything, as long as at the end of the day, it really moves the needle in terms of what I'm looking for, which is really, at the end of the day, it's that practical advice tailored to our business.
I love that, moving the needle. That's a very appropriate, and you're rethinking everything. And I think most people are in that mindset. Evan, where do you think we're going to be in a couple of years, 3 years? Is that very difficult and esoteric to even crack because we're thinking 2 to 3 months in advance, or you have a forecast for us?
I think there's going to be an increasing need to find ways to do what we do now, but do it more efficiently. The workload is going to increase disproportionately to the amount of resources that in-house counsel are going to have to deal with it. And I think that's going to change how we decide how to give things priorities. I think it's going to change how we deal with outside counsel. It's very hard for me to predict what the exact changes will be, but just based on, I've been doing this now for 15 years, just based on what I think the secular trends are, there's going to be more stuff to do, not a proportional amount of resources to do it. I'm going to be leaning on outside counsel somewhat more, but I'm also going to be requiring that outside counsel be increasingly responsive and increasingly part of my team rather than just a subcontractor for specific legal work. Because otherwise I just won't be able to do the job that I need to do. The other thing that I think we're going to see is we're going to see problems. I don't want to say problems, challenges that we don't yet know how they're going to play out. But every time I think I have my arms around this job, I don't. So for example, just when I thought I began to understand GDPR, we're now going to be facing increasing ESG pressures around the world, which is something that historically the legal department has not had really to deal with. That's for other people. But I think that's no longer going to be true in terms of disclosures, in terms of writing in codes of conduct and responding to customer pressures. So it's not a particularly helpful prediction just to say things are going to get worse and we're going to need more help. But that's about as accurate as I can get.
Those are, interesting forecasts and prognosis. Daniel, let's remove this slide, and we're now going to get into the Q&A portion, because I know that we have a number of law firms that would love to have a much more direct chat with our partners. And again, learning from this morning when everybody was asking questions at the very last minute. So, again, thanks to everyone so far for the incredible insights. And obviously, we will do a summary of what we think we heard from all of you. And then that information is going to be circulated to our partners around the world and have breakout conversations with them when we do our networking bi-monthly events. I also want to acknowledge that we have members of our board in this meeting. We have members of our management team in this meeting. And some of them have dialed in twice because they wanted to hear from both panels. So really exciting times for all of us. So I think at this stage, I would like, and I also wanted to acknowledge that we do have actually Jeff from Bray as an spectator. So Jeff, feel free to jump in at any time. We'd love to hear from you. You can compliment things that Brenda said, or just chime in on your own, whatever you like to add. So let me turn it over to our partners. You're welcome to raise your hand and you'll be unmuted and allowed to chat a little bit with our panelists. So I'll turn it over to you now for the remaining few minutes.
I think there's a first question from Emma Curtis. I don't know if Emma, you want to just reiterate or maybe vocalize the question you wrote in the chat a few minutes ago.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Daniel. I was glad to hear Evan actually just touch on ESG. It's certainly something that we're hearing a lot more about. So it was just really to get a feel from the panel how important you think ESG issues are going to be for yourself or for your in-house teams in the next couple of years, and particularly that sort of balancing of risk and ESG challenges that are coming down the line.
It's open to the panel, so anybody can jump in.
Well, my view, for what it's worth, is that all these trends start somewhere else and then ultimately wind up roosting in the legal department. So every time I see somebody doing something that they think will make the world better, I assume that in about 3 or 4 years, it'll have legal implications. I think ESG, and I'm setting aside whether I think it's a good idea or not, because that doesn't matter. That's not my job. Nobody cares. I think that ESG has gone from a kind of, wouldn't it be nice if everybody were nice impulse, to starting to get embodied in codes of conduct. It will eventually drift into various countries' regulations or regulators wanting people to address things. And so I think it will become an important issue for legal departments. And I think that means that it's important for the law firms to pre-develop the expertise so that when I come to you and I say, I need to know about X, you don't have to say, I'll get back to you as soon as I bought the books. An example is that, 10 years ago or whatever it was, climate change was just something environmentalists started talking about. And then the SEC started requiring disclosures, and then other countries required carbon reporting, which means that I had to look at it before it went to a regulatory authority. And now climate change is just another legal topic that my people have to deal with. So it's kind of a gloomy outlook on ESG, but that's sort of my views on it.
Thank you, Evan. Anybody else would like to chime in on that? It's all related to Emma's question.
Well, I would just actually follow up with Evan just on that. I think one of the issues that we've heard a little bit of difficulty in trying to pin down is how do you expect outside counsel to balance issues that may be novel in nature with very little legal precedent with your principal's risk appetite. So in other words, if there's a new area of law or there's new regulations coming in some jurisdictions that are interesting to you or that you have a stake in, how would you like outside counsel to go about it if there's very little legal precedent in the interim? That's an issue that's sometimes difficult to manage because there's a little bit of a risk assessment to know whether you're at the front of the pack or in the middle of the herd in terms of who's going to be potentially liable for any regulatory actions and so forth. So how is that an area that kind of overlaps what you're saying, Evan, just to kind of point back to you?
Yes, I mean, I can't give you anything specific because it's always hard to get your arms around the ether. But, if you start to see in your country a big issue about X that will impact my kind of manufacturing, I'd like to know about it sooner rather than later, if for no other reason than to make myself look good by talking to the operations people and say, did you know about this X, which is coming down? And then your job is to say, wait a minute, it's not just X. There was a bill that was put into our legislature that would do this. Now, we don't think it's going to pass this session, but the fact that it's now somebody has decided to throw a bill into the hopper means that we're starting to get out of the just kidding around area. And so now I need to start thinking a little bit more about what should we do to protect ourselves. So, for example, China is a fairly important country to us, unfortunately. And so one of the things that I actually have FLI do is once a month, they send me a summary of the key things that are going on that haven't yet turned into a final law or regulation, but give me a sense of where we're going. Sometimes I just take it and I say, that's interesting, keep me posted. Sometimes I cut and paste it and I send it around to the relevant operational people. Sometimes we actually do something to start to get ready for this because it's close enough so that it means that we have to start dealing with it in terms of policies or the like. So part of that is an interaction with the company you're dealing with and recognizing I don't want to know everything that's happening in China. I want to know things that actually affect us. And that becomes part of the discussion with the general counsel in terms of what's your appetite for information? How close does it have to be before you care? You know, do you want to hear about it when the train's leaving the station or only when your car is trapped on the tracks and the lights are bearing down on your company?
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions from the audience? This is your chance. This is your one chance to have a face-to-face chat with our delightful panel. You can put them on the spot. You can make them blush. You can ask them great or tough questions. Love to hear from you. Just got one on the chat. They said here, do you keep a scorecard with the external counsel that are providing services? If they do a great, I think you already alluded, most of you, that if they do a great job, you remember them and then you're loyal to them. But do you keep an active sort of a scorecard in terms of performance, efficiency, and cost? Let me go to Amy on that one.
Sorry, no, definitely not. It's just, it's too, it's too nuanced, it's too nebulous. It's just, and it's about the relationship and a million different interactions, and there's no scorecard. Hopefully it always, hopefully it gets better with time, sort of that those relationships develop and you get to know us better and get to know our style better. But nothing so formal as that.
And maybe while you're chatting, Amy, because this is such a great forum for you to have these many law firms out there, many in the jurisdictions where you are looking for those special minerals and gases and special nature. What would you say to these 46 countries? What are the kinds of deals that you would love for them to come back and say, hey, Amy, I think we got something that would be interesting for you?
Well, we'll look at almost anything, but we are historically an oil and gas company. We've looked at a lot of different things. Right now, we're moving towards geothermal. We're looking at helium deals, where most of our assets are in Central and Eastern Europe, but we go all over the world. So yeah, I would love to hear about it, because that is the shift, that you see. Like I said, at Aspect, legal's always been asked to play sort of a more strategic role in those conversations. And it just occurred to me, I don't know why it just occurred to me, but this is just an huge untapped resource for me, because I know you guys are seeing deals all over the world. I know you have other clients who are selling those deals, and every once in a while someone brings something to me, but more often than not, they don't. Law firms wait until I reach out in need of services. And I would love for people to email me about opportunities that they know about or can connect me to. That would be awesome for me.
That's great. And do the rest of the panel, when you think of our 80 plus offices around the world, providing services to all of you, as we transcend that relationship into a more strategic relationship, Evan just hit it on the nose. He said, I'm asking FLI to provide intelligent report in areas where I don't have the time or the bandwidth to know what the local nuances are. So is that of interest? Is that of value? Amy's saying, yes, transactional good lawyer is important, but if you have a business knows, that's a huge untapped resource. Do the other members of the panel feel the same way? Are we completely underutilizing the tremendous footprint of 20,000 FLI lawyers around the world. Christine, what do you think?
Yes, anytime a law firm could add value, it helps everybody, right? It helps the organization. As Evan said, it helps us look good. So I think there's absolutely thinking outside the box is something I think that will be really important going forward. You had asked the question about 3 years and sort of what we thought. And for me, the word that came up was agility, and the idea that you want to be able to meet challenges quickly and to know what those challenges are and to help to be able to do that and to recognize that and to get that from the law firm would be extremely helpful and add value. Absolutely.
Thank you for reminding me. We digressed a little bit. So let's hear everybody else give us their forecast. And then we're going to call you to the mat 3 or 5 years from now and say, boy, you were so far off, or no, you nailed it. So Neil, where are we in 3 to 5 years from now?
3 to 5 years in what sense? From the legal issues you have to tackle, relationships?
From your in-house gatekeeper role. I mean, where do you see the trends, the technology, the expectations changing? In, like Evan said, we are already in 2025. So then where are we really going to be in 2025? What do you think? What is your best forecast?
It's very tough to say. And I think it's new territory. I think we're all in this together, navigating it together. I think the regulatory environment is very active all over the world. We talked about data privacy in particular, but definitely in all different aspects. I think, the challenge for organizations like all of ours is we're in global environments, right? We have global organizations. And so to us, the law firms that are going to rise to the top are the ones that help us understand the legal implications, but understand it on a more regional and global footprint. It's hard for me, to give a practical example, it's hard for me to go in and troubleshoot data privacy laws in one small country and have it completely at odds with all the rest of my countries. Being able to harmonize on kind of those more macro levels will certainly be beneficial.
Great. Brenda, where are we 3 to 5 years from now?
Retired? I don't know.
This is where I go crazy. No,
Yeah.
anyway.
Oh, there's Jeff. All right.
Yeah. No, I think that the challenges will continue, and unfortunately, I see those challenges becoming even more difficult on the international platform, only because of politics mainly, and the directions that some of the major superpowers are going. And so that concerns me a lot. And so, we've kind of been in a, what should I say, a very favorable way over the last, at least in my career, 20 years of where, borders opened up, and, the Eastern Bloc of countries in Europe became far more accessible, as well as Russia and China and Southeast Asia. And so I would really, really be concerned about some of that reversing direction. And that's just going to add a lot of complexity to how we do business today.
Excellent. There's a question from our member from Israel, member of our board. Stephen, you wanted to talk to the panel?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you. So I'm interested in knowing how can we make FLI a direct extension of your legal department? Just how could we make your lives easier in that fashion? To kind of make it seamless between how you work with your legal department at large and us.
Okay. Anybody? Christine, do you want to take a shot?
Sure. I think we would all echo that we're all juggling many different tasks and wear many hats and have lots of challenges. And I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. And I think for me, what I'm looking for is just that idea of somebody that's a partner that can help me just move stuff along, just help me think not only analyze a problem, think through it, talk about, as I mentioned, the risks and possibilities, and then like help us get to a place in order to move that, because that one issue is many that we have on our plate. So the more you can sort of take it off, and I never want to outsource the actual legal piece of it. I want to come back, but I think that's really important. I think the other thing is to know that we as GCs have pressure from our clients, which is mostly probably our board and our CEOs, and certainly in my situation, the project team, that have to move quickly. And sometimes I think people don't quite appreciate that as much, to understand that it's not just me wanting the answer right away, and I'm not making up these deadlines, and really get to know the context and why it's important. And we're getting pressure from other places as well. So taking that time to help move that along.
Thank you. Stephen, I thought Christine was going to go right for a punch by saying, well, one way is for you to memorize what we've been saying for the last 2 hours, because that's how you're going to be our extension. But I want to go back to, thank you for being so sweet.
Well, the opposite of forgetting is it's writing it down.
That's it. No, but I want to go back to what Evan said a minute or so ago, because I think it's very telling when he said the expectations are going to increase disproportionately in ways that we don't even know how we're going to be able to do our job. So having the right, and I know you've all said it in your own ways, with your own words and in your own personality, but what you're saying in effect is, look, help me, help you, help me. You're out there in the trenches, you have the local know-how, so be fast. You have certain skills that we need, so be expeditious, and no lengthy reports, get to the point. For Evan, that's a must. All of you said, if you don't have the expertise, then pass on the jobs. We'll have a lot more respect for you than if you try to figure out at my nickel and my expense. Technology is going to empower all of us. And I think in time, hopefully next time you're with us in a panel or an interview, you will be a very loyal advocate of the technology that we are creating together. And then several of you during today's conference made it very clear that you really depend strategically from the efficiency of us giving it to you straight. I think, as Christina says, make it easier for me, give it to me in practical terms, be fast. And everyone is, of course, looking for cost efficiency. Others are a little more entrepreneurial, like Amy's, like, come on, think of deals. And by the way, I know that Israel is very innovative about that. And so some countries are a little more pragmatic than others. But perhaps maybe that is a question for our audience of 40 plus countries. In some instances, Amy, the mindset of the attorney in country is not to be, for lack of a better term, a go-getter entrepreneur. So how can we inspire these untapped resources that you mentioned? We have over 20,000 of the leading attorneys in the world in 80 jurisdictions. And we're only scraping the surface. In some cases, we're helping you more than others. But at the end of the day, there is a lot more that we could do. So how do we do that? How do we turn that into having the FLI community become even closer to your heartbeat than we currently do? Anybody? Amy, you want to take a shot?
Well, I would love to go back to the question that Stephen posed about, because I think I have a slightly different, more specific answer in mind, if you don't mind, Orlando.
Please.
Which is, I'm at a small company, right? So oftentimes if there's a big deal going on, we need to scale up quickly. And what would be super helpful to me is to have law firms connect me to or offer a broader range of services. So, one thing that most law firms do particularly well is offer translation services, right? They either know a translator or they have an in-house translator. And that's a key part of submitting documents in a foreign country, is getting those translation services. Another position that's not really there that you can hire lawyers to do, but I always feel a bit guilty about doing, because now I'm hiring someone who's very expensive and qualified, is to do something that is maybe not their expertise is more of a project manager role. And a lot of times we do that in-house, but sometimes we're just 100% tapped, right? And then I have this conversation where the law firm is sort of helping me and responding to my questions, but legal is tapped out at Aspect to sort of manage it. And all my other people who should be helping me manage it are tapped out. And it would be great. You know, it's a position that doesn't need a lawyer, but just someone like, you're too busy, Amy. Like we're going to own this project, and it's just someone who's helping you. Like you've got to submit this form, and right, and it's not, like I said, it's not a lawyer role. It's more of a project manager role. But understanding that some of your clients, when we go into a new jurisdiction, or just when we take on a new deal in a jurisdiction that we're currently in, you know, a lot of lawyers are workhorses. So at least in my experience, a lot of stuff gets shoved at the legal department that's not necessarily something I need to be handling, but like we get it done. And if you can help me get it done by offering, you know, a greater sort of panoply of services or service providers who are not necessarily your lawyers, maybe they're your paralegals or just someone who's not legal at all, but connect me to those people, help me find those people, help me offer greater services in-house to my company. That would be super helpful to me.
And I think that,
Amy,
oh, go
that's
ahead,
amazing. It's basically you want us to become your quarterback.
Yeah.
You want us to be your problem solver. I've been I had some in-house colleagues define use the following definition once. We want you to be our in-house external legal counsel, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Without the head count, Steve.
Exactly.
Well, actually, Orlando, I want to actually say what I was hearing Amy say, and I would actually, because I came from one of those big law firms with 600 lawyers in New York, and there used to be a model, and that.
Put your screen on, Jeff. Put your screen on so we could see your face.
Inspired me to move and do something in my own. Anyway.
Go on.
All right. Well, I had to, that might throw everything off. That's the problem. Anyway, so I actually would say, because I know we spend a heck of a lot of time with KYC efforts and resolutions in every country, and we don't need an attorney cranking those things out. We need a paralegal at your firms just being managed by an attorney that can do that. And they should be able to do that at cost. We don't need a partner cranking out resolutions. I mean, that's not what that's not cost effective for us. So in truth, we tend to make law sort of this very academic exercise, and it is at a degree. Trust me, we've had some really nice cases that are at true conflict of laws, cross-border issues, all those kinds of things. But a lot of the stuff we get passed along could really just be run through. And if there's an economy of scale, get people who are preparing. You know, you got to have a extraordinary general meeting in most jurisdictions, and then every year. So you got to have that prepared, and you got to have it signed and stuff like that. It's I'd say we need more of the paralegal role a lot of the times more than we need the partner role.
Amy, I think you voiced, because I kept watching, everybody was kind of nodding as you were articulating that. And, I think that those services that you're talking about, and I think now that Jeff is articulated even more, are services that we are absolutely, like, we totally get that, right? Translation is something that FLI has had for years. So we do that in every language in the planet. But now there's secretarial services. If you're going to be in a country for a short while, the domiciliation and the nominee director and all those kinds of things that you don't need a law firm. You just need them to quarterback it, organize it, and provide it in a cost-effective way. So these are the kinds of value-added services that I think are going to be expected. I mean, we've been providing it for years, and some clients know it and others don't, and some ask and others don't. But I think going forward is going to be for sure. And I just love the way you said that. I mean, you said, look, I don't have the bandwidth. I have a small team. And that speaks about the same This morning, we had a client that is running a $3 billion turnover with a legal department of 3 people. So I jokingly said, that's $1 billion ahead. I hope you can sleep well at night. And they all cracked up. So anyway, a very good question, Stephen. Very good answer, Amy and Jeff. Any other question from our partners? I want to have as many of our partners ask, because it's not every day that we get to have such a distinguished panel here.
I think Brenda had a quick point.
Okay, Brenda, please.
Yes, yeah, if I could, to Amy's questions and comments, Bray, our company has generally used FLI for those type of expanded services from the very beginning, because we didn't have an in-house counsel to start with. And so, the affiliates around the world, we're using, for example, a law firm in Spain to provide payroll services, and same goes for Uruguay. And so each time we go into a new setting like that, we often do have to use, to Orlando's point, the appointed local director, and if nothing else, to provide a counterbalance with a local manager, so that we're assured that proper decisions are being taken. And so we frequently use those expanded services through the FLI network, and as well as using project managers on different projects.
Yeah, I think that was the word I think you used, Amy, because that's music to my flock of geese. That's our logo. When you said, I need a project manager, because we use that in our daily run. I mean, we have this layer of former GCs, and as you know, and they are kind of running interference, but also we have our 20,000 attorneys, and they're just as capable to be that quarterback that Stephen was talking about. So thank you, Brenda, for bringing that up. And Amy, now you know that we can do a lot more. Any other questions? I know we're drawing to the very end, but I'd love to hear from other members of our community. Okay.
One thing that's come up before, I think, obviously not every single country or company has operations in every single jurisdiction. When is it appropriate, or when should FLI start thinking about these additional jurisdictions and providing that information to clients? I mean, when does that conversation start? Because I think there's a lot of data locally that can come in the form of reports or intelligence or any other form of legal update that can serve part of a risk assessment frameworks to inform clients about maybe a change in fiscal policy or a change in local legal landscapes that may provide the company with an edge, whether that be a first mover advantage or otherwise. How is that something that should be provided to clients in some sort of structured workflow, or more of an ad hoc way? We've had some of the clients on this panel ask us for essentially glorified newsletters, but targeted against certain matrices. Is that something that we should be thinking about in terms of local counsel? Should we be actively trying to share information, even if it's early days? I know Evan highlighted some reports that we do for AVX in some areas, but I think many attorneys are overly cautious not to be seen as coming across as overbearing or pompous or just too present in your inbox. And sometimes the less is more is certainly a philosophy many of us subscribe to, but should we at times override that in the spirit of trying to give you more for more? If that makes sense? Is that a reasonable line of argument?
No, nobody becomes a general counsel because they're shy. So I'm ready to accept somebody calling me up or sending me an email saying, hey, there's this thing, we want you to know about it. Do you want more information on it? That doesn't bother me. I can always say no. Now you should do it in the context of my business, so that if there's a whole new thing about Facebook social media, I don't care. We don't do that work. But as long as you're paying attention and you're doing it in a way that makes sense for what I do, don't be shy, because then you're just taking assignments. You're not acting as a partner. Somebody once said, what keeps you up at night? And I said, it's not the things I know that keep me up at night, however disastrous they are. It's all the things that I don't know that could come back to haunt me. So I think we're all looking for people who get over that impulse and are willing to work. Now, I think it's probably good if you avoid coming to me pompously, but I'll get over it if it's in the interest of my company. But that would be my response, which is, one of the consequences of being a partner, being a colleague, being a counselor, and not just somebody who does technical work, is you've got to get out of the box a little bit and reach out and accept the fact that sometimes you'll reach out and I'll say, no, I don't need that. Not a good idea.
Great. Well, I knew it was going to happen. It's been 2 hours. We've already used your precious time, and I think the participation has been stellar. We certainly appreciate every single one of the comments. We've learned a lot from you, and I know our community on the high point, 47 countries. And then this morning, I know there are 50 countries. So that's right there, our bandwidth. Have enjoyed hearing it straight from you. Very heartwarming, in some cases, very direct, to the point, because that's exactly what we're here for. So as we introspectively look back at what has happened, I want to go back and quote Christine's, I thought was very prophetic statement during the dry run. Said, let us not let COVID go to waste. We have certainly learned a lot of things. I think this crisis that we've experienced has tested our own humanity, and in many ways. And while in some parts of the world the crisis continue, and in other parts, perhaps we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. What is clear is that it's very early days, and we don't have a crystal ball. And all of you have given us forecasts of where you think we're going to be. I think that Evan was very prophetic by saying that we're probably in 2025, and in the sense that it's accelerated these changes. So let us keep a bright hope for the future. Continue to thrive in your areas of work, and let us continue to be your trusted advisors. We've taken everything that you've told us to heart, and we certainly cherish every one of your contributions. So thanks again to all of you. Continue to have a great day wherever you are, and you will get a little summary from us as we bring this conference to closure. If I could just have maybe some closing remarks. Is there someone that feels inspired to bring the conference to adjournment? I will be delighted. I will not pick on anybody, but who feels moved to bring it to closure? Any of you? I see a lot of smiles there. Okay, I'm going to pick on one of you. Okay, Neil, bring it to closure.
So in closing, we just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and all of your assistance. We really look to you and value and treasure your partnership. And so as I think we look towards the future, kind of the buzzwords we were using is, pivot, creativity, really look towards the future. It's kind of it's a chance to write new rules in this space, which doesn't come along very often. So take advantage of that and that opportunity. And we look forward to seeing newer and better and greater things from all of you.
Wow. I couldn't have said it any better after 19 years. Thank you, Neil. Thanks to all of
everyone.
you.
Thank
Be
you.
good. Be kind to one another. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks, everyone. All the best.